I've had a request to get a video out about feeding, spring feeding, so I'll give you my take on spring feeding, and you can use that as you feel fit. So in the spring, we typically want to be feeding a 1-to-1 syrup. When you mix just white sugar, don't use anything else but pure white granulated sugar. Sugar and water are the same by weight or by volume, basically. So if you're using 1 cup of water, you're using 1 cup of sugar. If you use 1 pound of water, you're using 1 pound of sugar. If I use 5-gallon bucket of water, it's a 50-pound sack of sugar. And that gets you really close. When I mix mine, I mix it at 2-to-1. The reason I mix 2-to-1 is 2-to-1 will keep longer if I don't need it. Then when you go to make 2-to-1 into 1-to-1, it's not a 50-50 split. So when I put 5 gallons of water in my kettle and I put a 50-pound sack of sugar in, then I put another 50-pound sack of sugar in. Had I wanted 1-to-1, I would have put another 5-gallon bucket of water. When I'm done making that syrup, I have 15 gallons. So I don't want to double that volume. I needed to add 5 more gallons of water. So I need to put 5 gallons of water into 15 gallons of syrup to get me to 1-to-1. So it's about 1/3 more water you need to use. If you put 2/3 2-to-1 syrup in your jug and 1/3 of water back in it to water it down, that is really close. So the thing about the spring feeding is they generally won't consume sugar or pollen sub if they can go out and get the natural stuff. So I don't know if you can see, but I've got big leaf maple just leafing out back there on the back line, and those are blooming right now, and they're putting on a hell of a nectar flow. So with days like this where the bees are out doing their thing, they're not consuming any syrup that I put in there. At 1-to-1, it can go bad, it can ferment. So you want to put in enough to be able to tell if they're taking it or not, so you know if you have a flow or not. And then if you know you've got bad weather coming and it's going to be 5 or 6 days of bad weather, even 3, you want to get some more syrup in there. And you don't want to get so much in there that there's some left over. You want it to be consuming it. That's the same time you need the pollen patty in. The pollen patty won't get used if they're bringing in good fresh pollen. So right now they're not consuming my pollen patties, and they didn't when I first put them in. But then we had 3 days of bad weather, and I looked back in and they had decimated the pollen patties. So what will happen if you don't have food on them and they get shut in, they will slow down their brood rearing and slow down their consumption of food. Just like if you can't go to the store for a week, you don't empty the pantry on the first day. So if they've got the reserve feed in there, what I'm finding is that they will not only continue to make brood, they'll make more brood through that cold spell, because they also have all the field force home to keep them warm. So there's more bees in the box all day than there would have been, and there's more bees to do the work, and so the queen can get busier laying even more, where she might have slowed down in the cooler weather with no food flow coming in. So that's my take on spring feeding. The pollen patty and the syrup is an insurance policy against bad weather. If you put the pollen patty in there and they do not need it and they do not use it and you throw it away, it's no different than paying your car insurance for 6 months and not getting in a wreck. You still wanted it there. Differently, when you get into fall to feed, you want to feed a heavier syrup because they need to dehydrate it to keep it longer, and we're getting cooler days and damper air, and they can't dry it as fast. So, and you don't want to promote a lot of brood growth unless you're hauling your bees to pollen, to almonds. So that's my take on the feeding. Don't let your feed go sour in the feeder. There's lots of types of feeders. The in-frame feeders, there's feeders that go in the front. If you're putting feeders in the front during a dearth, close the entrance way down so that you don't promote robbing, because you've got the smell of that syrup right out there on the front of the hive. In fact, anytime you're feeding during a dearth, you should have a very small entrance so they can defend the food they've got. Anyhow, I hope that answers some questions on the spring feeding. And if you've got any more, or I didn't cover something clearly, let me know. Put it in the comments. I appreciate it.